Well, good morning and welcome to the January 9th, 2025 meeting of the Clean Heat Standards Technical Advisory Group. I'm Rick Weston. I'm still the chair. Happy New Year to all. I hope you all had lovely holidays and were able to take advantage of some downtime. I certainly tried to. As always, I ask that the TAG members keep their videos on and their microphones off unless they're speaking. And for everybody else, your videos off and your microphones off unless you are speaking. So thank you. We have a quorum. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Chair Weston. I'm glad to be here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and to all. Okay. Let's see. Is there any other housekeeping that I've forgotten?
I think I see Matthew is here for the DPS. I'm assuming that means that Alec is not joining. Matthew?
No, this is
Alec
Matthew
is
Baker.
here.
Alec is here.
Oh,
This is
Alec
Alec.
is here. Okay. I missed him. Sorry.
And there's someone named Richard. Richard whom?
It's a member of the public.
Right. I would ask Richard that you turn off your video unless you're going to be speaking during the public comment period.
Okay, I will do that.
Right. Thank you. Hello, Matt. Okay. And don't forget to mute as well. Okay. Well, welcome all, and again, Happy New Year. We've got 3 items. Our purpose today is to deal with 3 items and 3 items only. And I thank you very much for making this time available and joining. Our hope is to come to closure, whatever the closure is, on 3 documents in advance today, so that they can go to the PUC or not in advance of its planned filing date or submission date to the legislature of its final report and draft rule. So that's what we're here for. I want to keep to the agenda times as much as possible. I'd like to say I've got a hard stop. I've got close to a hard stop at noon, but I think if we can get through this in the hour and a half, that'd be great. So with that, I will turn to Deirdre for any updates.
Well, minutes first, I guess. You want to
Oh
take the minutes?
gosh,
Sorry.
thank you. Yes, that's right. I always forget. We do have minutes from the December 12th meeting. I hope you all had a chance to review them. I always forget to mention this. I'm happy to take a motion for their approval, unless there are amendments that folks have for them. Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Is that Emily Grubert? Thank you. Okay, we have a motion. All in favor, signify by raising your hands. Or your yellow hands as well, whatever works. Okay, and now take them down. And all opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, they are approved.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for your usual reminder. Yes, updates from the PUC.
Yeah, so as you all can probably imagine, the commission is pretty focused on its deliverables to the legislature for 6 days from now, January 15th. So doing any revisions to the proposed rule, getting, putting finishing touches on the final report, and the economic analysis that will be associated with that report. So that's kind of our primary focus right now. The only thing that I think is worth also mentioning is Opinion Dynamics finished its the technical reference manual and the final emissions rates yesterday. And so while those haven't been circulated to you all, they are uploaded to the share file folder in the same place as they've been in the last, 2 drafts. So you all do have access to that, right now, if you want to download those from the share file. I think it's the same protocol. You just say your name and address, and or your email, and you should be able to access those documents. There shouldn't be any surprises in there. I think that they made the changes that they said they were going to make. So they did, mention those top level biggest changes were the treatment of advanced wood heat. So they removed the wood fuel measures and redefined all the advanced wood heating measures as fuel switches from fossil fuels, similar to how heat pumps are defined. They removed renewable propane, the carbon intensity of renewable propane from the emissions schedule, based on it not meeting that statutory criteria of rigorous analysis that's in statute. They did leave the narrative and measure characterization intact so that, when it does meet, that analysis can meet statutory requirements, it would be eligible. The decarbonization tables have been populated with final values. Pike, I see your email message about share file. I'm happy to I'll put that in the chat. Happy to do that. Any question? I think that's all I have in terms of updates. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Deirdre. I wasn't clear on the first change that you mentioned to the TRM.
The advanced wood heat, removing the wood fuel as a measure.
All wood fuel?
Just as before, it was treated as similar to liquid fuels, as like a replace, because they wanted to do it based on volume. But now it's more of like similar to an installed measure, like a heat pump.
Okay.
A lot of confusion on how to do that. So they explain it a little bit better in that last back and forth with the tag. I don't have that up right now, but
Yeah.
No, I understand.
Okay.
I understand. So the advanced wood heat is a measure, but wood fuels are not a measure, but the emission rates for wood fuels are used to calculate the credit values for advanced wood heat installations.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Good point. Yep.
Thank you.
Ken?
Yeah, so in terms of the rule, my guess, and tell me where I'm wrong, the rule is going to reference the technical reference manual. And does the rule also describe how and who adjusts the technical reference manual? I guess maybe a sub question is, does the commission approve the technical reference manual, and then on some schedule, I don't care if the rule talks about it, but on some schedule, the commission then approves changes to the technical reference manual? Is that generally how this is going to work? Or is there any mechanism that requires public input, public feedback to change the technical reference manual?
I do not have the revised rule up at the moment, but that your characterization sounds about right. I think we were taking that feedback that we received, that there was no kind of process about updates to the TRM in the original draft rule. And I believe the revised rule does incorporate more of a formal process for that. I can't remember on the top of my head if there's public process around it, but that'll be clearer on the 15th when we release the rule.
Thanks. Matt,
Yeah, Deirdre, two questions for you. One is, there was a filing deadline for obligated parties responding to the first year obligations that occurred on Monday, I believe. Will any of that information be incorporated in the rule, and if it's not, because it's time's ticking, will there be a response to that, a formal response to that for the PUC, if you know? And then the second piece is, will we see the rule along with the rest of the world on the 15th, or will there be an opportunity for the TAG to review before the 15th, understanding that there's nothing much more we can do for that process?
Yeah, so I don't think there'll be an opportunity to see the rule before the 15th. That'll probably be released to everybody on the same day. The other question, the determination. So we will keep the obligations, with all of the caveats that are in that document, separate from the rule. We don't plan to integrate those numbers into the rule. It'll be part of the January 15th package to the legislature. And I think there still needs to be a discussion with the commissioners about formally responding to the feedback that we received on those. I don't think it'll be before the 15th. But so I'm not quite sure yet about, because it's not a typical order, so it's a little bit different than we would typically process wise react to feedback. But that's where that is. That determination is going to be part of it's going to be no longer a draft, included as part of the January 15th package. And that's where that stands.
But if I may, Ken, Rick, so I guess my question is, I understand that there won't be time for feedback before then, and the feedback wouldn't be incorporated, but will the comments made in the draft first year obligations, will that sentiment, or at least some sort of paragraph, will be in the rule? If you know, can you tell us, or will that be just sort of a separate on an island over here discussion?
I think the latter. I don't think there's an opportunity to include that feedback into the rule. But I'll think about that, or, consider what the commission might be able to do to yeah.
The only reason I bring it up, and I'll just say it just plainly, and then I'll stop talking, which is, I think it's an important document. And if now that we're entering the political process, I think it's important that the people that are making the decisions on whether not to allow the rule to go into effect have a full scope of seeing it. So I would say any way that we can get, even if it's not part of the rule, if it can accompany the rule, I think it's an important document as we go forward in this process.
And you're specifically talking about the feedback, not the document itself.
No, I'm talking about the draft rule, first year obligations, and the feedback that comes with it, the whole package. I understand you can't incorporate that into a rule because it's not part of it, but I think it's integral to the decision process about whether and how to implement a clean heat standard by the legislature.
Okay. Yeah, the document itself will absolutely be part of the package. It's just a matter of getting the feedback somehow to be part of make sure that decision makers are aware of the feedback is what I'm not sure about, but
okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions for Deirdre? Well, if not, thank you, Deirdre, and we'll look forward to what? I guess next Friday. Is that the 15th? No, Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't add. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay. I want to turn to the first of the three documents that I'd like the TAG to consider. The first one on the agenda is the Advanced Wood Heat Carbon Intensity of Wood document. As you may recall, on December 12th, we discussed the draft document. I guess it was dated a couple days before that. that Emily was a primary drafter of, Emily Levin, and we had a vibrant discussion about it, but we decided not to take any action on it. There was feedback. There was a strong sentiment from members of the group to essentially tone it down, to take out, revise statements that sounded like, or were in fact, recommendations from the tag. The tag recommends this, the tag yada yada that. So Catherine and I took a stab at doing that. And the document you have in front of you, should we pull it up, Catherine?
Sure.
We felt that it was a fairly straightforward job, given the feedback we'd gotten on the 12th. Our object, again, is to see if the tag feels that we've produced a document, that we have a document in front of us that expresses thoughts, considerations, ideas that the tag can support. Again, the document largely identifies where critical issues are and makes general statements about what they mean and what further work could be done on them. Is it up? Do you have that up yet?
I thought I did. No, can others
Yeah.
see it? Yep, Ken can see it. Yep.
I can see it.
Oh, that's interesting. I can't. Let's see. Wonder where I've hidden it. There it is. Thank you. Okay, so you've got a track changes version, so you know exactly where the changes were made. I hope you had a chance to review it before today's meeting. I don't want to go through it in detail. We obviously we'll talk about the changes that we made, but they should be fairly self-explanatory. Again, we tried to make it a more general document in that sense, for lack of a better word. So let me just leave it there. Emily, do you have any thoughts you want to add to this? You reviewed what we did. Others, any thoughts? And is there an interest in taking action on this document? I've turned to Emily Levin first, and then I'll go to Brian. Just, is there anything you'd like to add, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, it's really not that different. The main, there are a few pieces that are a little bit streamlined or clarified. And then, I mean, the main thing that people seem to not feel comfortable with last time was there was language saying, tag members agree or tag members support this approach that people weren't quite ready to include. And I had only put those for things that there really have been no disagreement about. So I thought it was pretty clear that we supported the approach, but apparently not. So those have basically been removed, and so therefore the document is more like a summary of the issues the tag considers and where we are in the process. It doesn't really provide, at least on the carbon intensity of wood, it doesn't really provide a recommendation. It does on the issue summary for the first question about characterization of advanced wood heating measures in the TRM. But, given that the TRM has now been finalized, my understanding is that I think that, sort of via the PUC, this approach and feedback was kind of already conveyed to Opinion Dynamics, and my understanding is that it has therefore largely been incorporated into the TRM. So this is merely documenting for posterity what our feedback was that has already been addressed. So maybe it's a bit of a moot point at this point, but I don't think there's any harm in including it. I think it might be helpful to kind of document our thinking. So yeah, that's it. Hopefully it's nothing too, it's more of a description of where we are as opposed to offering really concrete recommendations.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. I think that's a fair representation. Mr. Woods?
Mr. Weston, thank you. So I actually did have a question about number one, particularly in the context of, a report out. I wasn't clear if we weren't giving recommendations, that then the first line is the TRM should be updated. I didn't really see how that squares. I didn't understand what "to the extent feasible" meant. I do have a revision, but further down, I'm wondering, we talk about the TRM, and I didn't know until just recently, until minutes ago, that it's been finalized. I didn't know when it was going to be finalized. I actually thought it had been. And so I'm trying to square, like, where we talk about, things that should be in the TRM, or OD's plans to use this approach, or we agrees with this approach. That's all been done, right? So some of the phrasing here is a little odd in the, in the context of the timing of the finalization of the TRM. So those are my comments on page one. I don't know if you're entertaining alternative or edits. I'm not sure how.
No, we can, we certainly can edit it. And we do it right now, because the idea would be to take action on the document one way or the other. It seems to me that there's some, given what you've just said for the first section, maybe a very simple edit would be to change offers to offered in the introductory sentence to the several bullets, numbered bullets that follow. And it's just, it is an awkwardness, as you rightly point out, by virtue of the timing. But I would tend to agree with Emily's characterization that it sort of becomes an historical document in that sense. But anyway, go to your next points.
Okay, so I think that's helpful. I thought it would be helpful to include the date of the memo of the advanced wood heating recommendation. That was November 18th, 2024.
Good. Yep, good idea.
Again, I don't know what "to the extent feasible" means, and I would take that out.
Okay.
Brian, what was the date again?
November 18th.
November 18, 2024.
And the comma should come out too. Okay.
Is that the advanced wood heating write-up, and that was conveyed to the PUC along with the 2 votes?
Yes.
Okay.
So in number 3, the last statement that's added says the TAG understands Opinion Dynamics plans to use this approach. And number 2 says we understand Opinion Dynamics agrees with this approach. I didn't understand, like, there seems to be a difference, but I don't know what the difference is. So I'm not sure what you were trying to capture by using different phrasing there. And I don't know, in the context of offered, if you even need those 2 statements anymore.
I will take responsibility for the difference in wording. It had no intent to imply a difference in meaning. And again, this was written before the final TRM was released, but is capturing the fact that Opinion Dynamics did confirm this in their response to our questions, that they plan to do this. So that was why.
Yeah, maybe just given the confusion around the timing, we could just delete those sentences about Opinion Dynamics agreeing with things.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
We can now just review the TRM and see what they actually agreed with.
Yeah.
And then we can write another document.
You can write one, Rick, but I'm not going
Enthusiasm
to.
Okay, do we want to move on to question 2?
I didn't have any comments through here. My next comment, oops, where did I go here? It was in it all the way down in section C, assumptions for GWP Bio.
Yep.
Or no, just above that, it said just yes. The assumptions about whether wood fuels are waste products. I think that's wood fuel feedstocks.
Thank you. We expected that you'd help us with this.
And then in number 1 below about the WWF calculator,
Mm-hmm.
it's this tree species in the forest stand. So that calculator and the methodology behind it is all based on analysis of forest stands and not at the landscape scale.
Okay. Great.
And then just the next question I had was down in the paragraph that starts with tag members also suggested that GWP Bio, I think it's on the next page. Yeah, so the last sentence that's added, the tag acknowledges the pellet market is dynamic. I was trying to understand what this means in the context of wood fuels not being a clean heat measure, which I don't think they ever intended were to be, and there was some confusion about that. But as we just heard Deirdre said, OG cleared that up. It's like the appliances are the measure, and the emission factors for the fuels calculate that. And then I'm trying to understand like what this actually means in the context of that. So presumably it means that somebody, perhaps it's this group, will continue to update the emission factors for wood fuels over time so that, the same appliance that got, X number of clean heat credits, if it was installed, in 2026, might get some other number of clean heat credits if it was installed in 2027 or 2028, based upon, not what the actual fuel it would be used, but some kind of an analysis of like current or near historical sourcing for pellet feedstock that's reflected in some kind of an emission factor. And is that what's intended here?
Yes, in my view, this sentence certainly incorporates that thinking. In other words, yeah, the growing knowledge and understanding of the market and, changing, as you say, feedstocks, it seems to me at least, would be part of the activity that Ken was asking about earlier, the updating of the TRM, refining the assumptions that underpin savings estimates for the various measures. Yes, that's what we're talking about. That's what I think we're talking about here.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to add that
I think the issue is that while the credit awarding is forward looking, and this is backward looking. Now, I don't have a good answer to how to fix that, but it just seems like an odd way to do it.
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily backward. Well, if the assumptions about the fuel mix are going to be based on, historical information, it's backward in that regard. But to the extent that those who are charged with addressing this question think that the changes in the historic market and so on and so forth are emblematic or at least somewhat predictive of what will continue to happen, then that seems reasonable to me.
I think Emily and Ken also had some thoughts on this.
I was just to clarify, I think, Brian, your clear on this, but in case there's any confusion, Opinion Dynamics was removing wood heat as kind of a standalone drop-in, like you get a clean heat credit just from swapping a fuel. But the assumptions around the carbon intensity of the fuel, like the pellets, are still embedded into the measure characterization for the advanced wood heat measure, just like the heat pump measure characterization includes embedded assumptions around the carbon intensity of electricity, for example. So, the fuel carbon intensities are still involved. They are just only, encountered as part of an installed measure, not as a standalone drop-in. I think I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that.
Ken?
Yeah, Brian raises excellent points. And I think this where we are with this, and as Emily also said, it's the same place we are with heat pumps, that we do have to assign credit values for the year that they're installed. I'm not exactly sure if those credit values change for that installation over time, because future year credits could be altered. I don't know. I mean, and the rule will probably be clear on that. But and Rick was right. This is the basis of my question to Deirdre. That and so I'll just run through what I think could happen. The rule gets proposed to legislature, and the assumption, I don't hold this assumption, but we have to work under the assumption the legislature approves the rule. And then in terms of implementing for 2026, it may be whether it's the tag's responsibility or the public's responsibility to say, hey, I don't think those carbon intensity values are appropriate for assigning credits for 2026 and beyond. Please revise them. And again, whether the tag participates in a review of the carbon intensity values that will lead to a change in the credit values, that is something that will happen in the future. But right where we are right now is OD has done their work. They have a technical resource manual, and it includes carbon intensity values, and that's where we are. But as I say, I think where we could be is with kind of some of the observations in here, if they're not included in the Opinion Dynamics determination of a carbon intensity value, in the future, it could be altered, and that will alter the credit values. And that's messy, but I don't think there's any alternative that certainly we can recommend or that is going to be included in the rule. But it's where we are. And some ways I look forward to the future, and in some ways I fear the future for how that process rolls out. But I'll just say in summary, this memo does, I think, exactly what we were supposed to do. Summarize the story. It doesn't force anybody's hand, because no one's going to change the carbon intensity values now until some triggering event happens. And we don't know what that triggering event is, but in the future, if the rule gets approved, then that triggering event will happen.
Ken, that was very, very helpful. I agree with how you described it. I would say this, as a general matter, given my own experience in regulatory matters of this sort, I would imagine, assuming everything that you've said, and that we're going forward with a rule, and that there will be credits assigned and valued and registered and so on and so forth, and then at some point there's a triggering event, I think it would be unlikely. I think it would be very messy, but I think it would be unlikely that the credit values for measures that were installed before that triggering event would be changed. I think that would be messy. That'd be difficult. That changes expectations for the particular for measures that have already happened. But that's
I'll disagree with that, because I think 2026 is the critical time. I think the summer of 2025 we can adjust the credit values.
Okay. Yeah.
So so I think that could happen. But again, I think that we're in a speculative world that I'm not
entirely speculative, and we don't need to worry about it. For me, it's always the sort of, you don't go back and change things for things that have already been identified. It's on a going forward basis sort of thing as a general matter. But I hear you. But we don't need to speculate. I mean, we don't need to solve that problem for the purposes of this document. That's fair. Okay. Any other questions about the document? Okay, if not, then I would entertain a motion on what to do with the document. Do we forward it to the PUC?
So I-
I'm going to take public comment, Mr. Porter, but in a moment. I just want to get some feedback. Just make sure there's no other discussion.
Yeah,
about-
let's see if there is a motion to approve the memo and forward it to the PUC before we take public comment. Then we'll take a vote after the public comment.
So moved.
Okay, we've got a motion. And under our rules, that's sufficient for taking action. We will take public comment now. Those members of the public who would like to speak, please raise your hands and we will call on you. The first one is the person at 5603. I'm guessing that's Mr. Weiss.
You guessed correctly, Mr. Weston. My comment is on when, at some time in the future, the carbon intensities get changed. I remember we had discussion on that earlier in this proceeding, and my recollection is that a decision was made that if a carbon intensity is changed in the future, it only applies to measures that were provided after the change, and there's no retroactive change to the carbon intensities of measures already installed. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to actually look it up right now.
I don't recall that we spoke definitively on that. We certainly spoke about it. But
You may have spoken about it, but I thought the commission made some action somewhere along the line.
oh, the commission itself, they may have. They may have.
I
don't
thought
recall.
so, but one would have to change that. You may be correct that it was only a tag discussion, and I'm
No,
not
and I don't-
remembering that fully.
And I'm not remembering either.
I'm
Deirdre,
characterizing that comment the way you intended. I think that is actually in statutory language, something like you can't retroactively change the value after you've awarded credits, something like that.
okay. Okay, there may be some ambiguity though, having to do with when you timestamp these things, but yeah. Mr. Porter.
Yeah, thanks for taking my questions and comments. I on December 15th, sent a letter to you all. I've since realized that not all of you are participants in the EPUC, so not all of you, and I'm thinking specifically of Dr. Grubert, may have been receiving documents that are submitted through the EPUC site. But that document on December 15th, using ANR sanctioned or commissioned documents and legislative commission documents, clearly describes that wood chips, which are not really mentioned in this memo adequately, I don't believe, but mentions that wood chips are purpose cut fuel, similar to cordwood. The two documents, one authored by Adam Sherman, says while historically wood chips used to come from mills, today they are cut right from the forests. Another from INSR document commissioned for Rygate clearly indicates that cutting for wood fuel is a choice. Nobody is obligated to produce biomass fuel, and many loggers do not. Logging activity for wood chips is much more abundant in areas where there's a market for it. So the idea that it's waste wood, I think, is debunked by these documents. But your memo is fairly silent on wood chips altogether. Wood chips are about half of, if we're looking at the 2 million tons of CO2 produced by biogenic combustion, that ANR puts off in a footnote in their inventory. If that is correct, then wood chips account for, at this point in time, half of those emissions. Large scale, future large scale thermal projects are much more likely to use wood chips than wood pellets. So I think it's a real oversight not to include wood chips. And I think it's a real disservice to the actual documentary evidence out there to consider wood chips a waste product with zero emissions. I think that's all of my comments. Oh, my one last comment is the TIRM says that EGUs, electrical generating units, are not eligible, but it's kind of ambiguous about combined heat and power plants. And I was unclear if an EGU, which is also a combined heat and power plant, would be eligible or not. And so I'd like to have some clarification around, and I'm thinking specifically about the proposed district energy system that VGS and Burlington Electric have proposed and which was put in the NV5 study. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Presampieri.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Pike's comment about chips. We also have the certificate of public good that the PUC issued to Burlington Electric. And Mr. Porter submitted that with his September 23rd, 2024 comments. And that describes the whole tree chipping process that Burlington Electric uses to get its fuels. And what it says is, after they are cut, trees are brought to a central location. Trees which can be used for lumber are then separated and delimbed. And the remaining trees are fed into a chipper, which reduces them to 1 inch by 2 inch chips. So it's really clear that they use a process called whole tree chipping. They're chipping whole trees. And we know from the literature that the carbon payback period for that is 100 years or more. Clearly, this is not waste wood. It's, it might be defined as waste wood in the forestry industry because they consider anything that isn't adequate for lumber to be waste. But for purposes of carbon intensity analysis, chips should not be considered waste. We also know that with regard to pellets, I think it's pretty clear that most pellets are coming from outside of the state. It's well documented that forests in the southeastern United States are being clear cut to produce pellets. So again, we shouldn't be giving a carbon intensity break to pellets. We should be assuming, we should be applying EPA's emission factors. The law requires that clean heat credits be based on accurate and verifiable CO2 emission reductions, and we don't have those in the case of pellets or chips. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Presampieri. Any other public comment? Ken.
Yeah, I want to respond to Mr. Porter's comment, and because I want to make sure that I understand where we are as a TAG and where the PUC is. My understanding is that any chip-based thermal project at this point is not included in the technical reference manual because, and this is where I'll turn to Deirdre, we assume that, and I'll call them one-off projects, unique projects, projects that are not included in the technical reference manual will have to go through a unique determination for establishing credits. That's been my understanding, and it's why I've felt, I'll say, comfortable not addressing chips. We know of no chip project since January 1st, 2023 that would be eligible for clean heat credits. And so that's where I am. And so because I know he's raised this issue on chips for repeatedly and consistently and appropriately. And I wanted to say that I don't feel that we as a TAG have ignored that, but rather have, I'll say, set it aside because we don't have a project we have to evaluate at this point. When that happens, that will be I'm surely contentious, but we haven't ignored it. And so I just want to make sure to my other TAG members and Rick and Deirdre that I have that right, because I hope that we haven't ignored it and have somehow allowed this process to move in such a way that chip projects are somehow going to move forward in that way. But I do, and then while I have the floor, I'll go back to Nick. My understanding is a very, very small proportion of chip pellets in Vermont are sourced from Southeast United States. Because I agree, pellets from the Southeast United States are different beast, and a carbon intensity value, if we had an appreciable amount of those, would be a significantly higher value than the ones that are sourced largely outside of Vermont, granted, but that come from, and I read in one of the recent pieces, I think it's now 48% mill residues and 52% what I call harvest residues. I won't use the word waste, but there is this, and I've tried to, and there's a document that maybe we'll see, that I developed that really does try to describe this whole thing about harvest residues that's based on existing Vermont policy on how we harvest wood in Vermont. Land use, current use requirements are that landowners follow a forest management plan, and in many forest management plans, and this isn't just Vermont, but it's just representative in Vermont, many forest management plans recommend low diameter young trees to be removed regularly to accelerate the process to mixed age, mixed species. So I don't know exactly how that should be managed, but I don't want, again, people's presumptions to say, oh, we're ignoring some of those forest management practices in terms of the wood pellet carbon intensity value.
Thank you, Ken. And your point about how we've dealt with chips and what we think is going to happen comports with my memory. Deirdre, if you have anything to add on that, that'd be great. And Mr. Persempieri, if I could ask you to turn off your video, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Are we ready for a vote?
Well, I gave Deirdre a chance to say something, but
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything. That is also my understanding. I kind of hesitate to say definitively about chip measures, about basically the assumption that they're all custom. I think that was essentially your point.
Yep.
And that's what I'm seeing in the TRM too, but
that's my recollection.
Yeah.
And that's why we've acted in this way. Thank you, Ken. That was very helpful. Yes, so we've already gone over our allotted time. Is there any other comment from members of the TAG? Okay.
All right, I can take the roll call. I think the motion before us is to approve the memo as amended with Brian's changes to be forwarded to the PUC by the TAG. So let me start at the top. Rick.
Yes.
Emily Levin.
Yes.
Jared Ulmer.
Abstain.
Alec. Alec, we still have Alec? He was there a
Yeah,
moment ago.
sorry,
There you
trying to unmute myself here. Yes.
Brian Woods,
Yes.
Matt Coda. Where's Matt? Do we lose Matt?
We may have.
Okay, let's keep going. I'll check back. Emily Roscoe,
Yes.
Luce,
Yes.
Patrick, Ken.
Yes.
Patrick, I believe, is absent today. Floyd,
Yes.
Sam Lair,
Abstain.
Michelle.
Yes.
Casey is also absent today, and Emily Gruber.
Yes.
I miss anybody? Let's come back to Matt. Is Matt with us? He may have dropped off. Okay. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 votes in favor of approval of this memo and 2 abstentions.
Okay,
So that will be recorded as part of the memo and forwarded to the PUC. We're on to the next issue.
great. Thank you very much. We're not taking public comment at this point, Mr. Weiss. Okay, on to our next issue. Public health considerations. This document. The reason this document is in front of us again is I'm the cause. As you recall, on December 12th, we reviewed the document that had been drafted, I believe, on the 6th of December. And we took a vote on it, and there was a majority vote, a simple majority vote in favor of it. I felt that given how the discussion had gone, I was optimistic that with a few tweaks of the document, we could secure a stronger majority in favor of it, and I thought that that would be good for the PUC. And so I declined to send it on, and began an effort to redraft those portions of the document that had caused some concern for members of the TAG who were opposed to it. We've tried to do that. Sam, Floyd, Emily, Jared, in the last few days have worked very hard and with some degree of well, it's not an easy process. Have worked on this document to address those concerns. The document we're putting before you does not, as I understand it, does not have the full support of the 4 of us or 5 of us who worked on it. But I do feel that this is me personally speaking now, and I'm not really, I feel that it gets closer to meeting the concerns that were raised. And as a consequence, I've decided to bring it back to the TAG, this version, for our discussion and consideration, and see where it takes us. If we have a vote in favor of sending it to the PUC, we will do so. If not, we won't. And then I would forward the other document to the PUC. But I hope we can make some progress here. So I'd like to turn it to Jared, who can explain what the changes are. They were highlighted in the document that was sent to you. And once again, I want to thank Jared and Emily and Sam and Floyd for the effort that they made on this. I know it wasn't easy, and I really appreciate it. So with that, Jared, I turn to you.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I'm happy to walk through the significant changes. I'll just say that there were small wordsmithing and cleanup changes that I don't think had any substantive impact that aren't highlighted. And there are also some deletions that aren't highlighted. So I'm going to mention also what was deleted. So
Jared, before you start, I just wanted to acknowledge Nora Travis as one of the people that did a huge amount of work on this, my colleague at NESCOM. I don't think we introduced her at the beginning of the meeting, but she is on and may participate on NESCOM's behalf in this portion of the discussion. So just wanted to both acknowledge Nora and let you know that she may be participating.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Emily,
Up.
and just thanks, Nora.
Jared, I'll encourage you to be as brief as possible. It's hard to do, I know.
I think I need 4 to 5 minutes. So
Oh,
here we go.
great.
So on page 2, the highlighted section, in response to suggested revisions provided by Floyd and edited by Rick, I revised this summary statement about biofuels to ensure that each finding was directly supported by the scientific literature described in the body of the memo and to improve the clarity and the neutrality of the language used. I did not agree with making suggested revisions that I thought introduced new information that fell outside of the scope of this memo as described on page 3, or that described the findings using language that I did not think was supported by the scientific evidence described in this memo. Whoever's steering, if you could please go to page 5. So on page 5, in response to Dr. Brown's comments suggesting we should elaborate on differences between combustion emissions from transportation engines versus heating boilers, I revised the description of why and how findings from transportation engine studies were used in this literature review, emphasizing that they were only used to determine relative changes in emissions when comparing different fuels, and that they were not used to draw conclusions about the composition or magnitude of emissions that would be expected from a residential boiler. Can you go to the next page, please? So on page 6, oh, yes, please stop there. At the top of the biodiesel section, this is more of a explaining comments that were provided. I did not agree to include suggested revisions provided by Floyd and edited by Rick that added 3 bullets at the beginning of the biodiesel section describing federal and state level biodiesel approvals, regulations, and usage trends, and 1 bullet mentioning that the American Lung Association had designated biodiesel as a cleaner air choice fuel. Referring back again to the assessment approach described on page 3 and the description of page 5 of what types of scientific research were considered in this health assessment, I did not think the suggested revisions qualified as scientific information. Presumably, those approvals, regulations, and designations were informed by public health evidence, but they are ultimately political or organizational decisions also influenced by other factors than just public health. What I would argue is more relevant is the underlying health evidence that informed those decisions. For example, Floyd asked me to review the California biodiesel evaluation study. I did, and I agree that it meets our inclusion criteria and have now cited it in the memo. The health impact findings described in that study are very nuanced, and their recommendation to approve the use of biodiesel came with several conditions based on health concerns. I think it's also worth mentioning that the California evaluation and approval was specifically focused on the use of biofuels in motor vehicles, which is not directly applicable to the clean heat standard. This memo is an attempt to communicate scientific nuance with appropriate context. I don't think a bullet saying that California reviewed and approved the use of biodiesel communicates relevant nuance or context. Okay. Page 7, please. This is just another omission, if you can go back. Near the top, there was a bullet that was removed that previously cited a quote that described how the lack of biodiesel research leads to scientific uncertainty about the health effects. And this was suggested from Nora that the journal that quote was published in had a relatively weak peer review process compared to other sources that we had already cited in the memo making similar statements. Page 8, please. So here in the biomethane section, in response to a request from Sam, we deleted a bullet describing findings from 1 biomethane study after agreeing that the findings were not directly relevant to expected US applications. The highlighted section, I did not agree with Sam's request to move the comments about harmful emissions from gas and propane cook stoves to the other considerations section, though I did attempt to clarify the relevance of including those comments. My understanding is that the Clean Heat Standard pertains to delivered fuels regardless of end use, so health effects relating to biofuels used in kitchen appliances are a directly affected health consideration. The last is on the next page, page 9. based on a suggestion Sam made to me by email, I added a new other consideration to flag that the scale and timing of the delivery of taking standard measures may affect the overall impacts. Those are all the major changes, so I'll stop there.
Thanks, Jared. I'd like to turn to Sam and Floyd for their thoughts on this document.
And should I just stop sharing at this point, or do you need to reference it?
Sam, I'd leave it up for now. Shall I start with you, Sam?
Sure, I can go first. Thank you both. And also, again, want to acknowledge that a lot of good work has gone into this. Documents come a long way since its first iteration, which I think really missed the mark. And in my view now, this document does really a good job of conveying many of the facts from the literature review. This was obviously a huge undertaking by Jared, who put in a very good faith effort in developing something good here. On my end, I'm still, I think, and the reason I say I think is because I want to be sure of exactly what we're voting on, but for me, it's still unopposed to the document. And the reason why I'm still opposed to the document is that given the purpose is to inform decision making by Vermont policymakers, I do think that the connotation of the document unfairly paints renewable fuels in a somewhat negative light. And, I should be clear, it doesn't completely paint them in a negative light, but I think it's too far in that direction for me to support. The two reasons, I'll go first with the suggestions that Floyd had made to include treatment of biofuels by other leading jurisdictions, which have worked on these issues for a really, really long time, including EPA, CARB, and the American Lung Association. I thought this was important to show how others have concluded positive benefits, but I understand, that we didn't include this because it's not specific studies, right? So in my view, including that would have balanced the document without taking away any of the other more specific conclusions, which were already made. And I think that would have done a good job of speaking to sort of the purpose of the document, right? Which is that it would be used by Vermont policymakers. Also, on the renewable gas front, I still don't agree with including the note about gas stoves within the renewable sections. I fully agree that that's an important piece of information, but I think it distracts from what are clearly conclusions around positive benefits compared to fossil fuels of those technologies. So that's why I still can't vote yes on this. I do think it's a better version. I really appreciate all of the work that's gone into this. Jared and Nora were very considerate of our concerns. I will just say in closing, I do think, and depending on how Floyd decides to vote on this, I do think it's glaring that the two people involved with the process, with a fuels background, are likely not signing on to the document, but we were very close to doing so. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sam. Floyd?
Yeah, thanks. And I want to, reiterate what Sam said with respect to my appreciation of the hard work that Jared and Nora put into this. I don't want to diminish any of that. Also appreciate the consideration and the attempt to provide a little bit more balance, and I can see that in some of the changes here. So I do appreciate that. Having said that, I'm going to go a little bit further than Sam, and I'll just cut to the chase. If and when we take a vote on this, I am going to vote a hard no, and there's a number of reasons for this. Just at a high level, Vermont it is not an island. You can't look at public health impacts in the vacuum, and that was one of the primary reasons I wanted to bring in, as Sam said, the perspectives and the status of these fuels at the major regulatory agencies that have spent decades studying these fuels, albeit in the transportation sector, but we'll get to that a little bit later. but they've spent decades studying the emissions and public health effects of these fuels, and have concluded that, overall, these fuels provide a significant benefit to the public health and the environment. I think that needs to be taken into account, especially since, Vermont is just recently started looking at this. And, I think it could benefit the policymakers, and the decision makers could benefit from the experience and the decades worth of studying these fuels. I do take some issue with the characterization that the conclusions from these agencies and American Lung Association are not evidence-based. Again, these are entities that have studied the scientific literature, the significant body of work for many years. I can't see how you can conclude that isn't anything other than evidence-based analysis and review. Going through this, again, I think what the paper does is presents pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and kind of gives the impression that that is what you should conclude about these fuels. I would submit that, number one, those pieces are not comprehensive with respect to the overall picture. And a number of those pieces, in fact, most of those pieces are not even the right puzzle. They're talking about, there are studies involving transportation sector emissions, not heating appliances, as was acknowledged in the study. And yet they're left in there, leaving the reader with the impression that, hey, there's all these studies showing significant uncertainties. Never mind that 3 pages before we talked about how these are not that relevant for heating appliances, but we're going to leave it in there anyway, and you draw your own conclusions. If you're going to leave in there transportation-related studies, I submit you need to present both the benefits and significant reductions in pollutants from those transportation studies, as well as some of these uncertainties that you've identified. And yet virtually none of those benefits and significant reductions in pollutants have been shown in the study cited. And we're just citing the studies that are ongoing. Academics like to research these things ad nauseum, and it presents the false impression that there's a lot of uncertainty with respect to emissions, and there really isn't. I mean, US EPA, CARB, they both have had these fuels approved for many, many years. As noted, American Lung Association specifically identifies this fuel as a clean air choice. This is a non-governmental organization that's charged with protecting public health through air pollution exposure. I don't think it's appropriate to discount those. Let me just give a couple of examples. So, going through the criteria and the rubric that was used to develop this, highlighted the peer review part of it, and yet a big part of the analysis cited the ABT review, which is a literature review, and that's not a peer review process, and yet it excluded the important work by Dr. Tom Butcher from Brookhaven National Lab, who arguably is the foremost, or one of the foremost, experts in combustion emissions from the heating sector. He did, as we pointed out in earlier comments, he did an extensive analysis of the heating appliance related studies and found that NOx was reduced, and other sort of benefits from those. That was not included in this in the citations. So I think, as Sam said, there's, I don't know if it's intentional or not. I'm not going to say it was intentional, but there is a clear bias against biofuels. And just to give you an example, this document, excluding the statutory descriptions in the first page, is about 7.5 pages long, right? 1.5 pages of those is dedicated solely to biodiesel, a little bit to renewable diesel. That's fully 20% of this document is there to highlight the parade of horribles, as I might characterize it, with biodiesel based on the studies that are ongoing in the automotive sector or the transportation sector. The vast majority of those citations are transportation related. We go to great lengths talking about how, hey, those aren't that relevant to this, but here's all this long list of citations and studies that are all, or virtually all of them are automotive or transportation related. I just don't see how that's a balanced presentation of the viewpoints and the perspectives that are out there. Let's see that, there was the highlighted language that Jared pointed out based on Dr. Brown's suggestion, I think, which was to, talk about how it's an imperfect comparison and composition and magnitude of emissions from transportation engines should not be generalized to residential applications. And yet bullet 2 on page 2 talks about how combustion emissions from these renewable fuels may have a similar or slightly less harmful effect. I mean, which is it? Is it you can't extrapolate the magnitude of these, and yet you're making the conclusion that is slightly less harmful. I would submit that many of these studies on the transportation side, since you're including them, show very significant reductions in a number of health impactful pollutants. None of that is presented in this document, which I think is unfortunate. I don't really like to talk about other fuels, but just when looking at the balance of things, I mean, there are conclusory statements in here. We don't need to get into them, but building envelope and electric heating appliances, scientific evidence is clear. I don't see where is the analysis that shows that supports that. I mean, that, you really just jump to that conclusion without really supporting it. It would have been nice to see some of that as a way of providing some level of balance. The general, on page 7, there's a statement, while there's some variation in NOx emissions reported, the general consensus is that NOx emissions are higher from biodiesel compared to diesel fuel. That itself lacks a lot of explanation and nuance. The higher NOx from biodiesel is shown only for a very small portion of the population of diesel engines, not heating appliances, diesel engines. Those are the older engines that don't have the exhaust treatments that modern engines have, and that's a shrinking population. That is not presented in this statement, and it's presented as a general consensus that NOx is increasing from biodiesel, but that's not the case with heating appliances. As I mentioned, Dr. Tom Butcher showed that, I think 10 out of the 12 studies he looked at showed a NOx decrease from using biodiesel. So there's so many of these sort of issues that I have problems with. Another example is reference number 20.
Well, Floyd, can I just jump in for a sec? I do want to, we want to hear what you have to say. We do want to, we're running out of time for one.
Yeah, I just have one last point. Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll conclude. So I didn't go through the entire list of citations, but I identified most of them as being automotive or transportation. I do have a particular issue with including reference number 25, which is the low emission diesel study. If you go into that, and that was cited as an example that renewable diesel might not have the sort of benefits that have been shown in other studies. I would point out that the low emission diesel study was virtually disowned by CARB's own executive officer, who basically said, this study is a one-off. It's not robust enough to base any sort of decisions on, and it's contradictory to the whole body of work that CARB itself has generated. So there's some serious anomalies with that study. Clearly, that wasn't understood or relayed in this document. And so I just wanted to highlight that as an example. But again, I do appreciate the work that was done here. I think we were close. If we had included some of these perspectives from the other agencies, given that Vermont needs to look at this as a whole, not just by itself, I think would have gotten us a lot closer to a consensus. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Floyd.
Thank you.
Emily Grubert.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to also express a lot of gratitude for the people that put so much work into this. And I realize we're running out of time. So just very briefly wanted to particularly say that I think this is a very challenging space in the fuels area. And I really appreciate that the document has been very careful to recognize that a lot of the older studies that claim reductions and things like that are based on quite different baselines than Vermont is dealing with, especially with the Global Warming Solution Act in place. So supportive of being very careful about what the comparators were, particularly related to fossil fuels.
Thanks. Nora.
Hi, thanks for allowing me to weigh in. I would just like to add to some of the comments that there are not scientific fuel-based experts on this panel. I would really like to point out that I've been in the biofuels health effects research space since 2008, and in fact have done much research on biodiesel emissions, which is cited in this document. And so I do think I have the qualified expertise to point that out, that between Jared and I, there's scientific expertise in how to review the literature. To the rest of the tag, there were a lot of concerns about the transportation versus residential heat space. We've pointed out and discussed numerous times that there are less than 3 biodiesel studies in residential heat systems, and therefore we've had to go back and do our best to compare against the transportation sector emissions, which do provide a lot of guidance. And we think we've been very balanced about that. Regarding Tom Busher, the biodiesel work that he's done is on a materials assessment and very little in the residential heat emission space. It was more residential heat, again, materials assessment to make sure biodiesel didn't impact the mechanical aspects of the heating. And Jared was very careful. I want to commend him regarding including other literature that's out there. We reviewed a report from the Greater Boston's Physician for Social Responsibility that would be equivalent to the American Lung Association. And we did not include that, which actually took a much stronger stance against liquid and gaseous biofuels for residential heat because of the uncertainty and lack of specific residential heating studies, because we felt that was too advocacy based. So that is our reasoning regarding that. Coming back to EPA and CARB and other folks studying biodiesel for decades, we come back to that being the transportation sector. And I would just conclude that we put into the document, I'm not sure if it's page 5 or 6, if Catherine can scroll to, but it says in the document itself from, I think it's the next page, thanks. In the document itself, we have one of the concluding statements from 2022 EPA, Biofuels and the Environment. This is like cut and paste, where it says about potential health effects from vehicles and, you know, susceptible human populations is limited. I mean, this is coming right from EPA. There's nowhere in this document where we say not to consider the tag, to not consider, or the PUC not to consider liquid or gaseous biofuels. It's more of a proceed with caution because there's uncertainty. And that's our job as scientists, is to provide that scope. And I'll conclude there. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Any other members of the TAG have comments they'd like to make? Jared.
Thanks, Rick. And I'm not going to take time to try to respond to Floyd's comments. I know we're running out of time, but I did just want to address a few of the points in that I genuinely believe I've strived to be fair and balanced through this entire report. And I want to read from one of the bullets, the first bullet in the on page 7 in the biodiesel section says several literature reviews. This is about transportation studies. Several literature reviews have summarized the health impacts of biodiesel primarily used in automotive applications, generally reporting reduced emissions of sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, PAHs, and carbon monoxide, and increased emissions of NOx and aldehydes, cited by 7 different literature reviews. I'm trying to be balanced. I'm delivering information that says that some things get better, some things seem to get worse, and that there are areas of uncertainty. I'm trying to deliver all of those different sides of the information. Many of these literature reviews, as Nora just pointed out, concluded that because of some of these concerns and uncertainties, and this is exactly what the California study says, it's hard to say whether the health impact is actually net positive or negative because of many of these uncertainties, especially when you try to take this information from the transportation world and apply it to the heating world. And we're only using it here because there's such a lack of information in the heating world. So I'm going to stop there and just, sharing that as a snippet of how I'm trying to just read the scientific evidence and deliver it here. Nothing has been omitted by design. If anything is omitted, it's by relevance, lack of relevance. I pretty clearly described the criteria for what is in and out and applied that consistently throughout this entire process. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Emily, I'm not going to go to you at this point. We're running out of time. I'd like to, and you will have a chance to say something here. I'd like to ask any other TAG members if they have any thoughts or specific additions or changes to the document that they'd like to make. And I'll point out that much of the discussion recent discussion has focused on parts of the document that weren't changed. So we are rehashing some of the issues that we dealt with on, or tried to deal with on, December 12th. But with that in mind, are there any other thoughts from anyone? Are there?
And could I just maybe try to get people focused in their recommendations on whether or not they would suggest specifically any change that has been suggested by Sam and Floyd, any specific language changes that they think would improve the memo? Would they be in favor of that and to propose that change? So we've heard what Sam wants to change. We've heard what Floyd is not satisfied with, but at this point, we need to know if any other TAG members would be in support of further changes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Floyd. Yes.
I don't believe the suggested language that I had circulated earlier was presented to the rest of the TAG. So I guess I'm a little bit confused about what you just said, Catherine, because the rest of the TAG can't really see what it is I suggested.
Well, I'm basing it on your summary of what you just went through. So
Okay.
verbally.
But there was important information in that in those bullets that I had submitted, which aren't in this version. So just wanted to highlight that.
So based on what Floyd has shared with folks, I guess is what we're basing this on, and what Sam has specifically suggested.
Emily Levin.
Yeah, I don't support any further changes. I think Jared and Nora have done an enormous amount of work. So I'm just, because Catherine specifically asked, I'm just weighing in. And I specifically just wanted to note one of the things that Floyd mentioned was the lack of evidence on the health impacts of weatherization and electrification. And I think what happened was this started out as a much shorter document, and in an effort to kind of try to come to a point where we could get the support of the biofuels focused tag members, an enormous amount of additional information was added just on biofuels. An equal amount of additional content could be added on every other measure, but there wasn't a constituency to kind of go add a bunch more in. But I just wanted, I don't think that we should pay much attention to the amount of information for each thing, because yeah, I just don't think it's fair to sort of have asked us to add a bunch of additional information about biofuels and then be concerned that there isn't enough information about some of the other things.
Ken?
Yeah, just quickly, I will vote to support this, and the reason is the intent of this document is not to determine whether the PUC should say we should go to biofuels because of their public health impacts. It's rather, this is one, and I'll say it's a small factor with regards to the pursuit of the clean heat standard. Clean heat standard is largely to address the greenhouse gas emissions from these fuels. And the way I read this document is that there is no reason to not pursue biofuels from a public health perspective. If it were solely, should we pursue biofuels on a public health perspective, we would deserve to go into this with much greater detail, and the points that are raised could be discussed more, but that's not the intent of this, and I do not think this is in any way, shape, or form misleading by the points that Sam and Floyd would prefer to have included in there. It's not going to mislead the Public Utility Commission, and I think it's appropriate. And I thank Jared for the work.
I want to note that Emily has to leave in 2 minutes.
Emily Grubert.
Emily Grubert, right? And would like to just have her vote in support of the document as is noted in the vote. Emily, do you want to speak to that verbally? I just want you to confirm that.
Oh, yes, confirmed. I vote in support of the document as is. Thanks.
Okay. Next step is to
take a
motion.
Yep. So the motion would be to approve the memo as drafted to forward to the Public Utility Commission.
So moved.
All right, thank you. And now we need public comment.
Mr. Porter.
Yeah, thank you. And it's refreshing to see some real science-based work being presented here. Thank you to the folks who drafted this and did the work. One thing that I guess my comment is really addressed to the members of the PUC who are here today, because the statute requires that the commission set standards or limits to prevent these consequences being health and other consequences. The rules that the draft rules don't explain how the PUC is going to do that. And my fear is that the consequences, specifically the health consequences around the wood chips that you don't want to discuss, are going to influence or affect either the technical reference manual or the use of advanced wood heating systems, et cetera. I think at some point in time, that question about how these health impacts are going to affect the use or not of certain fuels needs to be addressed. Thanks.
Thank you. And you're right, that's a question for the PUC.
You want
Okay.
to move to a vote and I can take the roll call. So I'm going to switch it up here. Emily Levin, what is your vote?
A yes vote means I support moving the document forward as is, right?
Yes.
So yes.
Jared,
Yes.
Alec,
This is Matthew Baker Poole for the department. Alec had to step away. We vote
Okay.
yes.
Brian Woods,
Yes.
Matt. We lose Matt again. He was in and out.
He's been jumping on and off the whole time. Yeah.
Emily Roscoe,
Yes.
Luce,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Patrick's gone, Floyd,
No.
Sam,
No.
Michelle,
Yes.
Casey's not here, and Emily Grubert voted yes.
No.
Pardon me?
Matt said no. Is that Matt? Coda?
Matt?
I'm here. I voted no.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And Emily Gruber voted yes. So that's 1, 2.
Gotten me.
9. Oh, Rick. Rick.
And I'm going to vote in favor of it as well for the reasons that Ken expressed.
Right.
Last
10
but not least.
10 yeses and 3 noes.
Okay, we'll forward it
So
to
that
the.
is the vote. And if you can hold on for another 10 minutes, Rick, do you suppose we could get through the final issue in 10 minutes? Which
I hope so.
Deirdre said was really important, would be really helpful for the tag to have this final memo.
Once again, you have in front of you the draft of the memo that I put forward in December. We didn't take any action on it. There were we talked a bit about it and we wondered if it said everything it needed to say. We gave it some more thought and I tried to, well, we gave it some more thought, but it's unchanged from the December version. I'm giving you I guess we're taking a vote on it. We are taking a vote on it. I feel like as chair, I could send this memo anyway, but I'm not going to. We've decided to take a vote on it. I'd like to send in a year-end report to the PUC that I hope agnostically describes all the work we did. And of course, at the end shows appreciation for all the assistance we've had and all the hard work. So with that, I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. And if there are changes we want to make to it, let's work on them real quickly. Ken.
Yeah, I will move that we send this document to the PUC as written. And I just have one sort of, I'll say caveat, but one concern. And that is that it does describe some of the difficulty in coming up with perfect answers. I mean, that was, of course, we're going to work to come up with a perfect answer. Sometimes those perfect answers are hard. I am very concerned that the Public Utility Commission is going to use that as reasons why they will not support moving forward on the clean heat standard, because I do feel that that's the direction they're going. And I'm afraid they're going to use that the inability to hit perfect is a reason not to move forward. And that really bothers me. But again, I ask that this document be moved forward because it is a good representation of our hard work.
Thank you, Ken. Is there specific language you would have me remove? I'll do it. I mean,
No, I mean, that big topic is one that will receive response because this will just be a little piece of evidence that they use. And so there's no reason to change this.
Any other thoughts from folks? Okay, we have a motion. Oh, go ahead.
The only thing that I'm just rereading it now, the only thing that was slightly confusing to me when I read it was that I felt that and I would still support it as is, but just from a clarity perspective, I felt like one of the most important things the progress report would do is to describe, summarize the results of the kind of the issues the TAG considered and the results of the votes. And I know we've conveyed those separately, but those were sort of buried under periodic reporting, and a lot of them related to like emissions accounting methodology. So I was kind of expecting to see them there. I don't know. It was just a little confusing to me where
Oh.
those came up.
Well, my structure was to follow the statute.
Mhm.
And that's where I thought those things should be dealt with. I thought I got them all.
But Emily,
But-
it's your point, you were thinking that we would describe the outcome of all of our substantive review and the votes? Because that would be essentially having to, go back to those memos and summarize them in some way, each of the outcomes, the substantive issues. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, that's obviously too much work at this point. I guess
Oh,
just, yeah, just making sure we have them all captured. And it also says we did not develop, so there's a 2 words there, strong majority positions. I don't know if that's still true. So just like double checking the accuracy that
back
we've
and-
listed the correct set of issues that we're voting on in the summary of them. And yeah, I guess it's maybe if you added, I think the other thing that would help me is that maybe under emissions accounting methodology, if you could add a sentence, Rick, or something that says something like the TAG discussed emissions accounting methodology for several fuels described further under C or something like that, so that there's like a cross-reference to where that comes up. Because I just was expecting to see some discussion of like would fuel emission schedules and biofuel emission schedules kind of under that item.
Sam?
Yeah, no, I think Emily makes a good point. I think it would be helpful to see at least where there were votes on different things. If there was just a sentence that said, the TAG had a majority on X issue. I do think that would be helpful. I'll vote for it either way, but if you wouldn't mind adding that, I think it'd be good.
I think the difficulty with adding the votes, I'll just say here, is that the issues are not, the issues we voted on are not described here. So the vote saying what we voted on doesn't really tell anybody who's reading this memo anything further. Because we haven't described what the issue was, what the alternatives were, what we were voting on. It just says we considered it.
With that said, I hear Catherine, I hear Sam and Emily. I'll take some time this afternoon and look at it and will do my best to if there's something that can be said that will capture what you're saying, I will do so. And I merely ask you to trust me. Okay.
Thanks,
With
Rick.
that, thank you. And if I have any questions, I'll give you, Emily, Sam, a call if I just want to make sure I fully understand. With that.
I'm just noting a comment in the chat from Matthew Baker Poole about a possible transposed number.
Oh, okay. Let me get that. I don't have
think
the
there's
chat.
2 instances where a section number was written as 8182 instead of 8128. Stood out to me because I make that mistake all the time.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Luce.
Hi, this might be for the next meeting, but there was a lot to do in this past year and we didn't have enough time, right, to look at all these issues we had to look at. So I don't know how we get that across. And that can be a discussion. We have one more meeting, I believe, so we can talk about that.
We have another meeting scheduled. That is correct. And I do want to close this. Well, first of all, we should have should take the vote. And I guess the motion is, if I may amend it in a friendly fashion, is to authorize the chair to forward his memo on his report to the PUC, amending it as in accordance with the comments received. Is that fair?
Second.
Sounded
Making
like a
motion.
friendly amendment, so I'll take that as my motion.
Yes, thank you. That was exactly what it was intended to be. Thank you.
Hey, you want to take a quick public comment?
Seeing none.
All right. Can
Maybe
I do a reverse on this and just ask if there is anybody opposed to forwarding the status memo with potential
Minor changes.
dates from, yeah, Rick, to the PUC? Could you raise your hand? And I will call your name out for the record. Okay, I see no objections, so I take that in the reverse to be that,
Well, no any abstentions?
oh, abstentions. Any abstentions?
Okay. Thank you.
I take that in reverse to be unanimous endorsement of forwarding this memo.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Now, we do have a meeting scheduled for January 23rd. That agenda, please, as always, if you have thoughts about what should be on the agenda, and Luce has just shared one, please send them to Catherine and Emily and me. I think what we will be spending a good deal of time talking about is what we see in the PUC's report and rule, and what we think, frankly, I'm sure we'll be talking about what we think the legislature might do. And what we will spend time, a good deal of time, I think, thinking about, and I have been thinking about, and I've spoken with some of you about, is really the next steps for the tag, if any, in the immediate future, given what I think is a great deal of uncertainty associated with potential legislative action or inaction. But let's have those conversations and see where they take us. I will say as well, in anticipation of that discussion, that you should know that as it stands now, at the end of January, we will no longer have Catherine's assistance. Her contract ends. That, of course, creates a great deal of angst in me, but I do want to say now, and I'll say it again in 2 weeks, just how grateful I have been for Catherine's facilitation of this group. You've been terrific, Catherine. We could not have done what we've done without your just wonderful guidance and direction. I thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Great. Thank you, Catherine.
Ken, one last thing.
Yeah, I also want to second that appreciation, Catherine and Rick. This work has been challenging. But I have a question though, and that is the Equity Advisory Group are they on track to also develop and present their report on
They filed
the 15th?
it. They have filed it already.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Just went out the other day. I did want to mention that. Thank you for raising that. I meant to mention it. They have filed it. So another kudos to Catherine's, to the EAG, of course, to Mia and to Catherine's colleague who assisted them. Emily Roscoe?
I may be mistaken, but I just wanted to check in. I saw there was an order from the commission suspending tag meetings. Are we all set to have one more? Did I read that wrong?
Well, I haven't seen the order.
Sorry, yeah, that went out just to make sure that people knew that we're bi-weekly, scheduled regular bi-weekly, but they can be ad hoc. So we'll make sure one gets issued for the 23rd.
Right.
Yeah, we'll do.
And we'll go from there.
Do you anticipate that meeting to be a full 3-hour meeting, Rick, or do you think it's going to get?
I don't think at this point, I wouldn't think it needs to be a full 3 hours, and we could start later. Or
Okay,
you
I
wanted
would
to
vote
start
for
early?
starting at the same time.
Oh, yeah,
I
you
have a
mentioned.
conflict partway through, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned. Okay, well, with that, and I'll repeat this next time. I want to thank you all for the hard work you've put into it. It's been difficult. It's been extraordinarily educational for me, across many dimensions, not the least of which is procedural when it comes to meetings like these and groups like these. So I want to tell you how much I appreciate all the hard work and the guidance and frankly the good deal of forgiveness that with which you've treated me. So thank you. We've tried to do good work. We've tried to make the world a better place. Let's see if we've had an effect. Thank you all. Thank you, members of the public, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Well.
Take care.